Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's design review panel meeting virtually. On our agenda right now, we have a development proposal at 233 and 235 Hunter Street East in Hamilton. My name is Edward Winter. I'm an urban designer at the City of Hamilton and hosting this meeting. Today we have our chair, David Cluzio, chairing the meeting. And in addition to our panel members, we have our applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing. Members of the public are welcomed here today to observe. However, there's no questions or commenting from the public. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the City of Hamilton's Design Review Panel website. Lastly, reminder to our panelists, please keep your microphones muted when not speaking. Thank you everyone for attending. David, when you're ready, you may begin.
Good afternoon and welcome. Edward, can you please confirm the session is being recorded?
Yes, I can confirm.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, there are no changes.
I'll take silence as indication that no panel members have any conflict of interest. Okay. On the agenda today is the review of 233 and 235 Hunter Street East. The lead planner in the file is Jennifer Caterino, who is available to answer any policy questions, and Edward Winter will make a brief presentation. So after Edward, go ahead, keep it under 5 minutes.
Okay, so yes, we're at 233 and 235 Hunter Street East in Hamilton. You can see in the center of the page, the blue rectangle with a square, a star is our subject lands. Diagonally, we have Hunter Street, and the major street going north-south is Wellington. And then we have mountain access, but there's a mountain access, this S-curve here, going up the mountain. So our proposed development is a 6-story multiple dwelling with 24 units and 178 square meters of amenity space. Demolition of 2 existing buildings are proposed to facilitate the development, and both are listed as inventoried properties, but not registered. Site photos. This is looking along Hunter Street. The second building, these vinyl covered buildings, is the subject site, and we're looking towards the downtown in the background. Close up at the site, subject site with these 2 clad buildings. And then looking the other direction along Hunter Street. We have a conceptual site plan noting the proposed condition with 2 sidewalks on either the west and the east side, but the primary entrance central at the front. Okay, we had some staff comments at the formal consultation stage. Staff noted the original FC was 4-story development, rental apartment with 20 units and 3 parking spaces with 81 square meters of outdoor amenity space and 65 square meters of roof terrace. So there has been a modest increase in the number of units from 20 to 24. We now have a mix of studio, 1-bed, and 1-bed plus den units. So I think where the changes are coming from. So our questions for discussion today is, what is the relationship of the proposed to the existing neighborhood character? Does it maintain and where possible enhance upon and build upon desirable established patterns, built form, and landscapes? Secondly, does the proposed represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Third, what is the relationship of the proposal with height, massing, and scale in comparison to nearby residential buildings? Fourth, does the proposal promote intensification that is compatible and in form and function to the character of the existing community and site? And lastly, does the proposal conserve and respect the existing built heritage features of the area and use materials that are consistent and compatible with the surrounding context. That's the conclusion of the staff report, so I will stop sharing.
I'll turn it over to the applicant if they could make their presentation and keep it under 10 minutes.
I can share my screen.
Okay, we can see it.
You can see it? Okay, good. This is a, as we said, a 24-unit apartment building. It's for Rob and Aidan Tuitt, who own the property right now. They're current owners of other rental properties, smaller rental properties. This is a building that they want to build and keep. They want to build it so it's compatible with the neighborhood. It provides good quality rental accommodation, and it's energy efficient because they'll be paying the bills on it for quite a long time. The area has, it's just outside the downtown core. However, close proximity to the GO station and Gore Park. There's 3 parks, and park gets close by, and St. Joseph Hospital employment zone. And the site is it's sort of adjacent to a combination of mountain access, one-way streets. The site is not easily accessible by car. This is a view of this street. You can see that it's one single lane, one way, ample street parking, and a 2-way bike path. So it's quite a unique street. Definitely not car oriented. It's definitely a more pedestrian oriented street. The zoning on the property is D5, and it allows for a wide range of housing forms. Essentially 0 front and side yards. However, a 7.5 meter rear yard setback is required. But the intent of the zoning is to maximize the lot area, as optimize the lot area. The landscape, the intent is to integrate the proposed development within the existing landscape and enhance the frontage along Hunter Street. This is Megan. You want to have a discussion about the heritage aspects?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Megan Hobson. I'm a Built Heritage Consultant and a professional member of CAP, the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. My practice is based in Hamilton. The subject property contains an inventoried heritage building that has been heavily altered and has been vacant since July of last year. It's secure and boarded up at the present, but has been repeatedly broken into. It is located in the Beasley neighborhood, one of the 5 original neighborhoods in the city of Hamilton. It's adjacent to several inventoried and listed non-designated heritage properties. The heritage character of the area is primarily defined by 1 to 2.5 story dwellings, dating from the 19th and early 20th century. They typically have hipped and gable roofs, and red brick and wood are the predominant construction materials. So there are 3 examples there on the screen from left to right. The building next door to the east, or mid-19th century, a building semi-detached across the street, late 19th century, and then an early 20th century kind of a double house that is next door to the west. The subject dwelling, if you go to the next slide, is a semi-detached bricked dwelling that was built in the mid-19th century, but later alterations have resulted in a loss of original features, The exterior has been reclad with a vinyl siding, and all of the original windows and doors have been replaced, and the masonry openings have been reduced in size to accommodate the smaller replacement windows and doors. Beneath the aluminum cladding, there is stucco that is not original, including a cement stucco applied to metal lath. You can see that on the little inset on the left, and also a cement stucco that has been stamped to imitate cut stone construction, and you can see a little bit revealed on the other inset on the right. The application of this type of stucco was often undertaken to address issues with the original brick and typically cannot be removed without damaging the brick. If you go to the next slide, the interior retains the original side hall layout with a narrow hall and steep stairs to the upper floor. The condition of the interior is very poor, and there are no architectural features or finishes of note. Okay, so if anybody has questions about, I can go into it further detail, but we have such limited time that I wrote this down. So my recommendations are on the screen here. If the proposed development is approved, I believe demolition of the inventoried heritage building could be appropriately mitigated through a controlled demolition process to allow opportunities for materials salvage. Impacts of the larger height and massing of the proposed 6-story development on the existing character of the historic streetscape are considered to be minor and can be mitigated through design measures, such as retaining established front setbacks, matching established roof heights with step backs and material changes for additional floors, and using materials that are complementary to adjacent heritage buildings, such as red brick and wood. I'm also suggesting that mitigation measures be undertaken to avoid negative impacts to the rubblestone foundation of the interior inventoried heritage building next door at 241 Hunter Street East, because it is so close. And that would include foundation shoring, retaining existing grades, and allowing for adequate drainage along the east property line. And just another note, in the list of these sort of recommendations that would be in the HIA, I mentioned to avoid shadowing on Walnut Street South. That should say Spring Street, so I apologize for that mistake there. But given the height and the shadow studies that were provided, there does not seem to be any excessive shadowing.
Okay, thank you, Megan. This is some illustrations which indicate the permitted height and volume permitted by zoning. And these diagrams demonstrate what we have done to essentially carve away at the permitted building envelope to create a response which we think is more appropriate for the site. Generally, the site plan, it's with 1.5 meter setbacks on the side, 0.9 at the front, 1.4 here because the lot skews a little bit, and we provided the 7.5 meter rear yard, which accommodates an outdoor amenity area. The building has essentially grade level entrance, and from there we go up 1.4 meters to the ground floor living level, first floor of units, and this additional height allows additional natural daylight in the lower level, as well as provides a nice separation from the street. Upper floors, very compact floor plan, mix of 1 beds and studios and 1 bed plus den, and step back occurs on the 4th and 5th floor. Each of the units fronting onto Hunter Street has the living room fronting onto Hunter. The bedrooms are tucked in behind. Just a cross section indicating the step back of 3.3 meters at 9.4 meters, and a more modest step back at the back, which is created by the balconies projecting on the lower floor and recessed on the upper floor. The elevation on Hunter Street, indicating the three-story mass, three-story wings, and the brick occurring at a level which is consistent with the facades on the street. The north elevation, it's the same. We carried the same material all the way around the building. On the side, you can see that it's the same vertical articulation of the windows. We have the brick base, a metal clad roof indicating a bit of an attic kind of metal roof kind of treatment, and projections around the windows emulating a dormer. There's the view from bird's eye view, with you can see the building generally in line with the others on the street. The step back occurring at this point, which is aligns pretty closely to the ridge of this building beside it.
You almost done there, Rick?
I'm almost done. Essentially, the sun shadow indicated that even with the this is the as of right, which essentially it passes this criteria, but it affects quite a few properties. Our building is much lower and has an effect on only 7 properties, whereas the as of right would affect 12, I believe. That's the end of the presentation for now.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the panelists to ask questions. And the first is Joey.
Thanks, David. I don't have any questions.
Jennifer Sison?
Thanks, David.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, David. And thank you, Edward, Rick, and Megan, for your presentations. I just had one question. I noticed in Edward's presentation that you said there was a roof terrace at the formal consultation stage. And I was wondering if that's since been removed, if you could kind of touch on why that was taken out.
The original proposal was done by another designer. And the original proposal also stretched all the way to the rear property line. So there was no backyard per se. So the only opportunity for amenity space was on the roof. As we're respecting the 7.5 meter rear yard setback, we're providing that amenity at grade in the rear yard.
Thanks, Rick. That's all my questions.
Dana?
Thanks, everyone. I just have a quick question. Maybe this is to staff around the requirements for garbage removal. Right now, are you proposing that you remove bins to the street weekly for garbage collection? Is that public? Is that private? Is there a threshold for what's required for private collection? Yeah, those are my questions.
And can you respond to that?
Yep, thanks, Edward. Typically, waste management's preference is for municipal pickup, and they'd have to sort of drive on site with a truck. In this particular instance, we'd have to get confirmation from waste management to see if curbside pickup is the appropriate option. Unfortunately, I don't have those details at the moment, but given the constraints of the site, it appears that would be the only option if municipal pickup was possible.
Okay, thanks.
Eldon?
Thanks. Just 2 questions. The first is to staff. the applicant is proposing 0 parking, just wanting kind of confirmation that, like, what is the understanding as it relates to parking requirements in this area?
Sorry, Edward, it'll just take me 2 minutes to pull up the zoning. 1 sec.
It says 0 per unit if it's less than 12, if I'm understanding this correctly here.
There's a couple requirements, I believe. I think it's based on the number of units and the size of the units. So we would need the parking to be confirmed by a zoning examiner, but I can give you what the zoning says in just a minute. But and just one other point of clarification: this site is it is considered downtown Hamilton, so it is within the downtown secondary plan area. It's right at the edge.
And I guess I'm looking on the screen and it's saying a minimum is 0 and a maximum is 1.25. If that's the understanding, I think that answers my question.
Okay, if that works for you. I do know, I think there is also like a size requirement. So if you look under multiple dwelling where it says A, sort of on the right-hand side, there's yellow highlighting. So then it says dwelling units with less than 50 square meters in gross floor area. If it's between 1 and 12 units, there's no parking requirement is the minimum. And then as the unit sizes increase, so if you have a unit greater than 50 square meters, the rates change slightly once you're over 12 units.
Right. My other question is, I guess, to the applicant. I think, Rick, in your presentation, you mentioned that the building is an energy efficient form. So if you can elaborate on what energy efficiency this building is achieving.
We'll be looking at an enhanced building envelope in terms of insulation. The owners mentioned something about gray water, which we're considering, and in terms of wind glazing, we just got the noise study that just came in this morning, and there will be sort of more robust glazing required because of noise. So that by extension will help with the thermal aspects as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jennifer Mallard?
One question building on Eldon's sustainability theme. What's the heat source for this building? Is it electric or gas?
We're not far enough down the road at this point.
Mhm.
However, as I mentioned in the introduction, the owners, the builders are going to keep this building for a long time. So it's in their economic interest to do a very energy efficient building to reduce their costs long term.
Great, thank you.
Ted?
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
I also have no questions. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to provide commentary. And the first is Joey.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Edward, and Rick and Megan for your presentation. It is nice to see the heritage consultant here representing the heritage context. Always nice to get another perspective. I also agree with Megan's recommendations, in particular, the one where the applicant is encouraged to undertake a controlled demolition to allow opportunities for material salvage of brick and lumber. Whether those are for reuse or potentially can inform some sort of commemoration of the building that will go away at the site, I support that approach. I don't have a lot of comments. I really like this project. We've seen projects from this architect before. I am a fan of their work. Templar Flats, Stinson Lofts, and recently Pasadena Apartments are all very good projects that consider existing and or heritage buildings, and in a sympathetic way where they put the heritage building before, before the new addition, where the existing building informs the design approach. That's something that's very difficult to do. So I understand that. It's the way that I approach architecture as well. So I appreciate their work, and I also appreciate this project and the approach to it. I also think it addresses like larger issues about this housing crisis that we're in, and taking alternate approaches to housing other than the massive tower. And this is more of a missing middle typology, really fitting into the context. Really kind of thinking about the historic context and addressing that. On that, with respect to the design, I think I have like an overall comment about the typological approach to it. There's clearly a lot of emphasis placed on following datums and lines and proportioning and composition of the adjacent heritage buildings. But I feel what's happened is that that the building itself, even though the massing works very well, that it's not clear what type of typology it wants to be. It feels like it wants to do what the houses are doing next to it, but I feel it should maybe read more like a typical walk-up building. And there are like several insertions, very good insertions throughout residential neighborhoods. So I'll make that recommendation. I'm sure my colleagues here have other ideas about the design, and I will leave it to them to discuss. Thank you.
Jennifer Sissom.
Thanks, David. So I'd like to start to say, yeah, I agree with Joey's comments, particularly on this being a good example of that middle housing. And Rick, I'd agree with your earlier statement in that I think the height you've proposed is appropriate to the site and area as opposed to the as of right height. I'm not really going to comment much on the building otherwise. I'll leave that to others, as I just want to spend my time on the landscape and amenities. So on that note, I did want to say that I really appreciate that you've retained those large mature trees on the site and that you've provided some nice at-grade amenity space for residents. And I'm also happy to see that you've got the main entrance to the building being nice and accessible, and you've included some bike parking at grade. However, given that you have no car parking on the property, I really encourage you to look at providing more bike parking opportunities, as I can see residents choosing this as their primary transportation mode when cars just aren't an option for them and not everybody, wants to walk or take the bus. So I would really encourage you to consider that, including more at-grade bike parking and even more storage for bike parking for the winter. I'd also encourage you to consider using the rooftop as additional amenity space for residents, along with the terraces where the building steps back. I could see that being an opportunity for rainwater collection, as I think you mentioned some gray water being an opportunity, and then you may also want to consider making that into a green roof or some other form of attractive design, as a number of the residences are going to overlook that building step back. So making that more of an attractive space for those residents would be appreciated. Overall, I have to say, I think this was a really well thought through design, and I'm always happy to see the redevelopment of unused lots. And I'm also pleased to see your consideration for the heritage of the area. So thank you very much for a very nice design.
Dana.
Thanks. I just want to say I also agree with Joey and Jen's comments. I think this is a great example of infill in an existing neighborhood. I think you've put a lot of attention towards the heritage, the massing, the step backs, setbacks, and the context, which I really do appreciate. Like the others, I will leave detailed architectural comments to the architects, but just say, like, moving forward, there's two things that I think that should be considered in the design as you do detailed design, is making sure that you have a canopy at the front door for weather protection, whether it be people waiting for rides or moving outside with their bicycles. And also, just to build on Jen's comment, that if you know, if there isn't enough room for additional bike parking, maybe it's that you look at within the unit floor plate and see if there's an option for bicycle storage within the unit, or making sure that's kind of prioritized, whether it's through a den or a storage closet or wall hanging or something like that, to ensure that, you know, being that this is has cycling lanes on the street, that we can make sure that there's an opportunity for everyone that wants one to have access to bike parking space. That's everything for me. Thank you.
Eldon.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to echo my fellow colleagues, Joey, Jennifer, and Dana. I agree with all their comments entirely. I just want to echo that I think this is, as they've said, a great example of how you kind of break that glass ceiling of the stable neighborhood in a way that addresses housing issues and in a way that's sensitive to the surrounding context at the same time. I think in terms of the comments the staff asked, I think it does address compatibility. It does address transition, particularly how you address the side lot relationships and using secondary windows. I think that was a good choice, and I think it absolutely fits within that context. I agree with Joey's comments where he spoke to making a decision as to whether this is a apartment building or whether this is a housing form. I think you can bring that brick a little bit higher. I think you can make some additional choices as it relates to kind of reduce the choices of how much materiality you're using on this building, or perhaps colors, um, to be more truthful to what the form is, which is really an apartment building within this neighborhood, and still be successful with that. I will defer to my architectural colleagues on the team. I know they'll have some thoughts about that, but I will say that I very much enjoyed seeing a proposal like this in this neighborhood, and congratulate you on the hard work you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ted?
Yeah, again, thanks, Megan and Rick, for the presentation. Highly laudable project, you know, from the perspective of infilling a neighborhood in a very, you know, appropriate and sensitive way. So thank you for that. I think a lot of it's been said from the architectural challenge here is that, you know, it's kind of in a middle zone where it's not a large building, but it's relating immediately to its residential components. And one of the precedents was the Cumberland project, which uses a very similar approach. However, it's topped out at that third level with a similar dormer roof, et cetera. And I think the challenge here, particularly when I look at the front elevation, is that there's a scale disparity between the base and the upper level. Upper level has a much larger scale. It almost feels like it's heavy on top of this lower scale, which is relating to the immediate residential texture and datum. And it feels like the actual building itself wants to just figure out what it wants to be in terms of its own massing. And I think you can still maintain those datums, but, you know, does the brick come up higher? Is there less materials, maybe just one above the upper level? Is there a more consistent approach to how those steps work as repetition, or some greater clarity to that? But you know, we'll leave that to you. But I do think that there is another look would greatly benefit the project in terms of how that expression resolves itself with its own scale as somewhat self-referential. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can echo everybody else. I think it was clearly a project that we all liked. Very common sense kind of approach to building within this community, adding a bit of density. That diagram which you illustrated what is allowable on the site is kind of scary, to be honest with you. I'm kind of surprised that that's the recipe that's buried in the zoning. I think you found a much more appropriate and successful recipe there. And I think we actually, in our pre-meeting, we felt that this was, we didn't really have any much criticism. We had to look at it at a very, starting to get into pretending to be architects ourselves on your project. And so I think that's some of the comments that we were receiving here are illustrative of the fact that we, there was so much there thought through already that we were just focusing on, nuances that you will work out, I'm sure, as you go forward. But I sympathize and agree with some of the comments that Ted and others have made, that maybe that the degree of respect that you have for those datum lines and the decision to, keep down to the brick, echoing exactly the size of the additional, the buildings on either side. I think given the change in typology from single family to a multiple unit like this, that you could relax that and maybe be a little more reflective of that difference, and still achieve a kind of a harmonious relationship with the rest of the buildings. And maybe the building itself is a little slightly differently composed and feeling a little less top heavy, I guess, in some ways. Not that the massing has to change. I think you might want to just look at your application of materials. But you've done so well, I'm sure you'll figure this out. It's I agree that you've been here before us many times with generally quite respectful and sensibly scaled projects, which is, to be honest with you, a bit of an exception in terms of what we see in front of us. So it's always a pleasure to see you in front of us, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll chime in. I think, David, you just, by mistake, you missed me in the round, but
Sorry.
no, it's all right, because I support my fellow colleagues' comments. I wanted to add one thing, that I appreciate that there are developers and architects who are willing to and interested in working at this scale, replacing a building that needs to be replaced with a building that will improve the neighborhood and the block and will be built with quality workmanship. So this is a definite improvement to what's there, and improvement to the neighborhood. I agree with David's comments just there about simplifying the definition of materials, so that the cornice line doesn't cornice line and change material from brick to siding doesn't sort of cut it in half, and maybe bringing the brick up one level. I think Eldon suggested that earlier, and instead of 3 different main colors, maybe it should only be 2, just to simplify the perceived massing. I think the massing itself is successful. It's just the cladding that could maybe use some simplification. That's all for me.
That doesn't change my concluding comments in any way, and I apologize profusely for missing you. But that's what happens when there's 2 Jennifers here. Sometimes that's my only excuse for doing that. Anyway, I don't know if the proponents have any questions, or applicants have any questions for us.
Just as a point of clarification, there was a question about the parking requirement, and the bylaw does distinguish between units that are under 50 square meters and over 50 square meters. So we were quite careful to sort of work with those provisions in order to reduce our parking requirement to 0. Otherwise, I think the comments are very helpful. We went through a lot of iterations with respect to materials, what goes where. I don't want to show them to you now, but we can look at those again, and your comments are quite helpful. And I think Megan was of the same opinion that maybe the brick could go up one floor higher. And so maybe she had something there. So thanks for your comments. Megan, do you have anything to add?
Just to say, yes, I mean, it's top heavy and it's, the existing buildings are 2.5 stories, so you've kept it at 2. Why not go to 3, 2.5, 3? It's the same. I don't think it's gonna be imposing. I think it's just gonna look like something that was meant to be there instead of something that was trying to fit in. Do you know what I mean?
See, it's important to bring these heritage architects. on.
Yeah. Look, it's. I mean, Megan's right, and it's a difficult sort of process to find that right balance when you're really trying to pull from the existing, but also understanding that you're trying to do something different and contemporary. It's hard to do that. It's not easy, and we're not taught that in school. It's something that we learn really through practice. So, and that's all to say that there's not enough of it in school.
You did make a good point, Joey, though, that there are examples out there. And so architects were comfortable doing that in the early 20th century, but they're not anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think this project is proving that, we can and we should be comfortable with this approach again. So.
I think we're wrapping up then. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. This was a great discussion. So thank you for participating with our design review panel. That concludes today's presentations. So I want to thank our panel for their contributions for the entire year and wish everyone a happy remainder of 2023. And we'll look forward to meeting with you all in the new year. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.